Smoke and silence, the widow's last breath of hope. The sky was no longer blue. It was black and red, filled with smoke, ash, and fire. Pieces of buildings still burned. The ground shook every few minutes as distant blasts echoed through the ruined city. Deep beneath a broken wall, hidden inside what was once a family home, an alien widow held her two small children close. Her arms were wrapped around them like a shield, though her body ached and her breathing was shallow. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. The last of the clean water was gone. Her name was Kaylina. She used to be proud. Her people once called her beautiful and strong. But now her skin was covered in dust, blood, and old tears. Her long silver hair was tangled and her glowing eyes had lost their shine. Her mate, Tyron, had died in the first wave. He had fought bravely, trying to protect their home from the invaders. They were not soldiers, just a family, just civilians, but the enemy did not care. Kaylina could still hear his voice in her memory. If I don't come back, protect them. She had for 4 nights now. She had kept their children hidden beneath rubble in silence without light. The enemy drones still flew overhead, scanning for life signs. Sometimes they sent soldiers on foot, dragging survivors out of hiding. Her youngest, Eleni, whimpered in her sleep. Kaylina quickly pressed a hand over her daughter's mouth. Her heart raced. She whispered softly, "Shh. It's okay, my little star. Don't cry. We have to stay quiet." Her other child, Kior, who was just 5 cycles old, clutched her arm. His eyes were wide with fear. His skin, once a warm glow like hers, was now pale and cold. Outside, a strange sound echoed through the ruins. Heavy steps, slow, steady. Approaching. Kaylina froze. That wasn't a drone. Drones floated. These were boots. Someone was walking. She moved her children deeper into the shadows, behind a broken piece of metal. She picked up a sharp stone she had been saving in case she needed to fight. Her hands trembled. She held her breath as the steps came closer, closer. Then stopped. Silence. Only the crackle of distant fire remained. The smoke made it hard to breathe, but she stayed still, her senses sharp. Then, a voice. Not her language. Not the language of her people, but soft, kind, strange. "I know you're there," the voice said, speaking slowly. "I saw the child's blanket. I'm not here to hurt you." Kaylina narrowed her eyes. Her heart beat faster. "I'm human," the voice continued. "My name is Mark. I was part of the relief team. But they didn't make it. I've been searching the ruins for survivors. Human? Her people had been told humans were dangerous, ruthless. They had come from another sector. They didn't belong here. They had brought their war with them. And her planet got caught in the middle. She should stay silent. She should wait for him to leave." But Ilani started coughing. A dry, harsh sound. She tried to stop it, but it was too late. The human heard it. "I'm coming closer," the man said, but his voice stayed calm. "I'm not armed, just water and food." Kaylina didn't believe him. She held her stone tighter, but when he stepped into view through a gap in the wall, she saw him clearly. He was dirty, tired, and had a long cut on his cheek. His eyes were sunken, like he hadn't slept. But they weren't cruel. They were soft, honest. He slowly placed a small metal case on the ground, then raised his hands to show he had no weapon. "Take it," he said gently. "If you don't trust me, just take the supplies. I'll leave." Kaylina stared at him. Her claws twitched. She glanced at her children, who looked up at her with weak, confused eyes. Then she made a choice. She stepped out from behind the rubble, still holding the stone, and grabbed the case. She backed away quickly, never taking her eyes off the human. He didn't move. Inside the case was water, real water, clean, and dried food that still smelled fresh. Kaylina's hands shook. She opened a small pack and gave it to Ilani, who took it slowly. Then she looked up at the human again. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was low, hoarse from smoke. "Why are you helping us?" The human looked at her, and then at the children. "Because no one helped my family when we needed it," he said. "And I swore I'd never walk past someone suffering again." Kaylina didn't speak. She didn't trust him. Not yet. But in that moment, something shifted. The smoke still choked the air. The ruins still held danger. But for the first time, in days, she didn't feel completely alone. The human stranger, friend or foe. Kaylina didn't sleep that night. She sat with her back against a cracked wall, her children resting on either side of her. The human, Mark, had stayed on the other side of the rubble, near the entrance. He didn't come closer, not even once. She could still hear the soft breathing of her children. Ilani was finally calm and Kior had curled up next to her after eating. But Kalina's eyes stayed fixed on the human shape in the shadows, just beyond the faint glow of the smoldering ruins. She hated herself for accepting his help. She didn't know him. He could be lying. He could be a scout for the very enemy that destroyed her city. And yet, that water had saved her daughter. Kaylina tightened her grip on the stone in her hand. She hadn't dropped it since he arrived. The silence between them stretched long into the dark hours. Occasionally, a wind would blow smoke through the collapsed structure, and she'd feel her throat tighten. Her body was weak, and every bone ached, but her mind stayed sharp. Then, just before sunrise, the human spoke again. "I didn't sleep," Mark said quietly, his voice hoarse. "Didn't want to leave you unprotected." Kaylina didn't answer. He sighed. "I'm sorry about your mate. I saw the broken badge near the child's toy. He was a soldier." Her heart clenched. She hated how easily he had noticed. She hated that her grief was so obvious. "He wasn't a soldier," she said slowly, each word careful. "He was just a good father." Mark nodded, though she could barely see him in the dim light. "That's harder than being a soldier." Kaylina blinked. She wasn't sure if that was wisdom's or a trick. "You speak my language well," she said. "I studied it," Mark replied, "years ago. Your people were our allies once. Then the treaties broke and now it's all fire and ruins." Kaylina's jaw tightened. "Your people brought this war here." Mark didn't argue. "I know." His answer surprised her. He didn't defend himself. He didn't lie. "I didn't come here to fight," he added. "I came as part of a peacekeeping unit. But we were shot down just after entering orbit. I'm the only one left." She still didn't trust him, but something in his voice, the weight of it, made her pause. Kior stirred in his sleep and reached toward her hand. She gently stroked his hair and watched as he settled again. Then she looked at the human. "I still don't trust you," she said. "You don't have to," Mark replied. "Just let me help. Then I'll leave, if that's what you want." Kaylina looked down at the stone in her hand. It had been her only defense, her only weapon. Now she was holding it less tightly. Before she could reply, a sudden sound made both of them freeze, a loud click, followed by a sharp buzz. Mark leapt to his feet and reached for the side of his coat, pulling out a small scanning device. He held it up. "They're close," he whispered. "A drone sweep is passing through this sector." Kaylina stood up quickly and pulled her children closer. She could feel the vibrations in the ground now, barely there, but rising. She had heard this sound before. It meant search parties were coming. "Help me move this panel," Mark said, rushing to one side of the wall. "There's a gap here. We can get underground, just for a while." Kaylina hesitated. Going into an unknown place with a human? But then the buzzing grew louder. She didn't have a choice. Together, they pushed aside the debris, revealing a narrow opening leading down to what seemed like a collapsed storage tunnel. It smelled like dust and damp metal, but it was better than being spotted. She motioned to her children and they slid through first. Then she followed, still clutching the stone. Mark came last. pulling the panel closed above them. Total darkness. Kior whimpered. "I've got a light," Mark whispered, switching on a dim red beam that cast soft shadows across the broken walls. Kaylina's eyes adjusted. The tunnel was tight, but long. It ran beneath the ruins, likely an old service path from before the war. They walked in, silence one slow step at a time. Dust fell from above. Pipes creaked under their feet. "How do you know this place?" she asked him. "I read the old city blueprints before coming here," he said. "I hoped these tunnels still existed. Guess I was right." She looked at him again. This time there was something different in her gaze, a flicker of curiosity, maybe even respect. But then Mark stopped. He knelt by the wall and gently wiped off a dusty panel. Kaylina stepped closer. "What is it?" she whispered. Mark stared at it. "A map," he said, "and a power source. If this still works, it could lead us to the old shelter zones. There might be medicine, food, maybe even other survivors. Or a trap," she said sharply. "Maybe," he agreed. "But staying here means death. That drone will return." Kaylina looked down at her children. Ilani had fallen asleep again in her arms. Kior's eyes were still wide. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Lead the way, human." Mark smiled softly, but didn't reply. He tapped the panel, and the old wall hummed faintly. Lights flickered ahead in the tunnel, but in the shadows, something moved. Kaylina saw it first, just a glint of metal. A drone had found an alternate route, and it was watching them. Beneath the ashes, secrets they buried. The glint of metal was brief, but Kaylina had sharp eyes. In a single motion, she dropped to the ground, shielding her children with her body. Her instincts screamed. "Drone!" she hissed. Mark spun around, drawing a small device from his belt. It looked like a scanner, but it had been rewired for something else. Interference. The drone's red sensor blinked, and a soft hum echoed through the tunnel. It hovered above the floor, silent but deadly, scanning their position. Kaylina clenched her teeth. Drones didn't speak. They didn't warn. They just marked targets and called the soldiers. Mark crouched low, whispering, "I can jam it." Maybe. 15 seconds after that, either it fries or we're dead. Kaylina's claws extended slightly. She whispered something to her son, who nodded and clung tighter to Ilani. Then she looked Mark dead in the eye. "If you fail, I kill it. You run." Mark didn't argue. He flicked a switch, and the scanner in his hand let out a high-pitched pulse. The drone's sensor flickered, stuttering, glitching. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, sparks. The drone jerked sideways, colliding with the tunnel wall. Metal screamed as it crashed to the floor, twitched, and died. Silence. Kaylina didn't move for several seconds. Her heart was thudding like a drum. Her children trembled beneath her. Then Mark exhaled. "That was too close," he muttered. She looked at him sharply. "We need to move." It likely sent a partial signal. They hurried deeper into the tunnel, the old lights flickering as they passed. The path curved, and the air grew heavier. The walls were lined with old pipes and faded warning signs in her native language. Eventually, they reached a sealed door, partially buried under rubble. Mark stepped forward, brushing off the dust. On the metal door was a symbol. 2 hands, one alien, one human, joined together. Kaylina's breath caught. "This is from before the war," she said quietly. "A joint research site." Mark nodded. "I read about these. Before the breakdown in peace talks, your people and mine worked together on science and survival tech." Kaylina ran her hand across the symbol. Her mate had once told her about these places where truth, not politics, ruled. Places that were hidden when the war began. To protect knowledge. Mark pulled out a small tool from his belt and started working on the control panel. "Door's got backup power. Give me a minute." As he worked, Kaylina sat with her children. She tried to comfort them, but her eyes stayed, fixed on the human. Her thoughts were racing. Why had her people buried this alliance so quickly? Why had they believed the worst about humans so easily? Was it fear, pride, or something more dangerous, like lies? The door clicked. With a long metallic groan it opened. Inside was a dark room, silent, untouched by time. Dust floated in the air, but the place was solid. The lights blinked to life slowly, revealing rows of data cores, broken equipment, and, in the corner, a still glowing terminal. Kaylina stepped in carefully. She could feel the history here. The echoes of things left unsaid. Mark moved toward the terminal and wiped the screen. It flickered, then booted up. As he tapped the console, an old message played. A hologram appeared. An alien scientist, elderly and tired. To any who find this, the peace was real. But someone wanted war more. We discovered messages, fabricated, altered, designed to turn our worlds against each other. My last act is to lock this truth away. Someday, I pray someone finds it. Kaylina stood frozen. She stared at the hologram, her heart pounding. What is this? She whispered. Mark's face was pale. Proof that the war was manipulated, that neither of us started it. Kaylina stepped back, eyes wide. Her whole life she had believed humans were the ones who attacked first, that they had broken the alliance. But if this was true, if someone on either side faked the messages, who did this? She asked. I don't know, Mark said. But we need to take this. Show someone. She looked at her children, then at the message. No one will believe us. Then we make them, he replied. Before she could speak again, a distant noise echoed down the tunnel, not a drone. Voices, harsh, mechanical, soldiers. They're close, Kaylina said quickly. Mark pulled the data core from the console, stuffing it into his pack. There's a second tunnel, he pointed. It leads through the collapsed sector, but we'll have to climb. She nodded, already moving. But as they reached the far side of the room, a sudden crack echoed behind them. The floor shook, explosives. They found us, Mark shouted. The ceiling cracked. Kaylina pushed her children ahead. Go, now! Rubble rained from above, and in the chaos, Kaylina looked back. Soldiers in black armor poured into the lab, human, but not like Mark. Cold eyes. No mercy. She slammed the emergency seal on the tunnel door, trapped them inside. Saved her children. As the door sealed behind her and the lights faded, Kaylina finally understood. The real enemy wasn't a species. It was the one who profited from their hate, and she had just found a reason to fight again. They are hunting again. And the children are crying. The sound of the emergency seal locking shut echoed like thunder through the tunnel. Kaylina stood with her back against the thick steel door, breathing hard. Her arms shook. Her legs ached. The children were sobbing softly in the dark, their little hands gripping her sleeves. Mark crouched beside the tunnel wall, watching her, still holding the stolen data core in his bag. That was close, he said, quietly. Kaylina didn't respond. She was listening, her ears trained to pick up even the faintest sound. But it was already clear. The enemy was behind them now, trapped on the other side of the door. But only for a while. They'll bring cutters, she said flatly. Maybe 2 hours, no more. Mark nodded grimly. Then we move, fast. Kaylina gathered her strength. The weight of what they'd just learned, the proof that someone started the war on purpose, was still heavy in her chest. But right now survival came first. She gently helped her daughter Ilani to her feet, brushing dust from her pale skin. Kior was still shaking, his wide eyes full of fear. We're going to make it, she whispered to them. Stay close to me. Hold on tight. Mark turned his red light torch on again and led them through the narrow tunnel. It twisted in strange directions, cutting under broken buildings and hollowed-out chambers. The further they went, the older everything became. Pipes ran like veins through the walls, Cracks leaked mist. Sometimes they passed skeletons of old machines, or worse, the remains of people who hadn't made it out. Kalina noticed every detail. Each corner could hold death. Each sound could mean discovery. After nearly an hour, the tunnel opened into a shattered subway station from centuries ago. A massive dome above them had partially collapsed and water dripped from the ceiling in a steady rhythm. The silence was eerie. They walked across the cracked platform, stepping over old rails and shattered glass. At the far end, light flickered. An exit. But before they could reach it, Ilani coughed. It was sudden, dry, sharp, and loud. Kalina froze. Mark raised his hand. Too late. A new sound echoed from above. Clack. 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 Kalina looked up. A small black sphere dropped from the hole in the ceiling. A scout drone. Mark grabbed Kalina's arm. Run! The drone lit up, its red eye blinking. A harsh alarm shrieked through the air. They ran. Kalina grabbed both children and sprinted, behind Mark as the drone gave chase, weaving through rubble, flashing lights in every direction. Mark threw down a small charge from his belt. It exploded in a flash of light, stunning the drone just long enough for them to escape into the exit tunnel. They didn't stop running until they reached an old elevator shaft. It was open, and it went up. Mark looked at her. We can climb. Kalina looked at the children. Too small, too weak. I'll carry one, Mark said. You carry the other. She didn't like it, but they had no choice. She strapped Ilani to her chest. Mark secured Kior to his back with torn cloth. Then they climbed. Step by step, they pulled themselves up the ancient metal shaft. The wind howled through the broken vents and dust stung their eyes. Halfway up, Kalina's hand slipped. Her grip weakened. Mark reached down. Take my hand, he shouted. She hesitated. Just a second. Then she grabbed his wrist. He pulled her. Up. They kept going. Finally, after what felt like forever, they reached the top. A metal grate blocked the exit. Mark kicked it open. Fresh air hit their faces. They emerged into the ruins of an old military checkpoint on the surface. The sky was gray now. The smoke was thinner, but the danger had only grown. Kalina looked around. The buildings were burnt, some still smoldering. But in the distance, they saw movement, figures in armor, enemy patrols. They're sweeping the outer zones, Mark said. They're looking for us. Kalina looked at her daughter. Ilani's eyes were shut. Kior was breathing fast and shallow. They're too weak, she whispered. They won't last another day like this. Mark's face was hard. I know a place, he said. It's far, deep in the southern ruins. There's a human refugee shelter. They'll help. Kalina stared at him. You think they'll help me? My kind? Mark didn't flinch. If they don't, I'll make them. She looked at him. Really looked. His face was scarred. His hands were bleeding from the climb. His eyes were tired, but he had never once looked at her with fear or hate, and now he was ready to fight for her children. She nodded. Then lead, she said softly, and I will protect your back. They wrapped themselves in old cloaks they found near the checkpoint and moved through the ruins like shadows. Kalina held Ilani close, whispering soft songs to calm her. Mark carried Kior, checking their path with an old map on his wrist. But the patrols were everywhere. And now, the enemy knew the widow had something they feared. They would stop at nothing to find her. Kalina knew they would come, in waves, in fire. But for the first time since the sky fell, she was not alone. And she was ready to fight. A shelter found, a storm coming. The sun barely broke through the thick clouds as Kalina and Mark moved through the smoking ruins, their backs bent low beneath ash-covered cloaks. Each step was a risk. Each breath tasted like metal and dust. Kalina gripped Ilani to her chest, feeling the heat from her daughter's skin. Too hot. The child had a fever now. Mark had Kior wrapped tightly on his back. The boy had stopped crying. His silence was worse. They traveled through what was left of a residential zone, once a bright district filled with gardens, skylights, and laughter. Now it was all blackened stone and twisted steel. Mark held out a hand. "Wait," he said. They ducked behind a broken vehicle frame. Kaylina peeked over the edge, her eyes scanning like a hawk. Soldiers, 6 of them in black armor with red visors, moved in formation. Their boots crushed the ground with slow, sure steps. One of them held a small device, sniffing for signs of energy, heat, or life. Kaylina's claws flexed silently. Her instincts screamed. Mark leaned close and whispered, "If they spot us, we're dead." Kaylina gave a tiny nod. "Then we stay shadows." The patrol passed, and they moved again. Faster now, heading toward a collapsed monorail station. At the bottom of the slope they found it, an old blast door half buried in earth and debris. A symbol was painted on it in faded white, a single eye with a line through it. Mark smiled. "This is it. Human. Resistance Shelter 7. He reached into his bag and pulled out a metal card, old and scratched. He slid it into a hidden panel near the door. Nothing happened. He tried again. Still nothing. Kaylina stepped forward. "Try the power port, the grid node." Mark opened a panel and rewired a power cell from his belt. The console sparked, then flickered to life. A light blinked green. The door opened with a slow grind. Inside, silence. Mark led the way. The hallway was dark, but cool and dry. It smelled of stale air and rust. They moved carefully through the tunnel until it opened into a large underground chamber. Shelves lined the walls, water tanks, power converters, medical equipment. But it was empty. Kaylina turned slowly. "You said there would be people." "There were," Mark replied, frowning. "There should have been." She moved through the main chamber, scanning the room with her sharp senses. Then she found something. A bloody trail. "Mark," she said sharply. He came running, and his eyes followed the red smears on the floor, leading to a locked room. He forced the door open, and the smell hit them first. Inside were 3 human bodies, civilians, dead for days. One of them was holding a child. Kaylina looked away, pulling her children closer. Mark clenched his jaw. "They were executed." "By your soldiers?" she asked. He shook his head. "No. Look at the marks. These were done by raiders, scavengers, not official military." Kaylina studied him. "You still think your people can be trusted?" Mark's voice was quiet but strong. "I don't trust people, I trust actions, and I'm still here with you." That stopped her. She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded once. They moved fast after that, searching the shelter, collecting food, water, and a small emergency med kit. Kaylina laid Alani on a cot and used a scanner to check her fever. It was high. Too high. "I need medicine," she said. "Real medicine." Mark searched the cabinets and found a cold injection serum meant for flu symptoms. It wasn't much, but it was something. Kaylina gave Alani the dose. The child whimpered, then slowly relaxed. "She'll need rest," Mark said. Kaylina sat beside her, brushing silver strands from her daughter's face. Her hands were trembling. "She's all I have left," she whispered. Mark sat on the floor, near them. His eyes were distant. "I had a sister, younger than me. She was born during the first peace years. I thought she'd grow up without war. But then, everything broke." "What happened to her?" Mark's jaw tightened. "She died in a bombing. Government blamed it on your people. But now, after what we saw in that lab, maybe it was a lie." Kaylina didn't speak. But something in her shifted. She looked at him not as a human, but as someone broken, like her. Then the shelter's alarm screamed. Red lights flashed. Mark jumped up. "Motion sensors. Outside." Kaylina stood immediately and picked up Kior. "Enemy." Mark ran to the monitor. Not soldiers, not drones, something else. He checked the cameras. Kalina looked too, and froze. At least 10 figures, tall, mutated, wearing makeshift armor. Not soldiers, not even soldiers gone rogue, scavenger beasts. Raider mercs. Flesh-hungry survivors who roamed the ruins, killing anything that moved. They tracked us, Kalina whispered. Mark turned. We need to seal this place down. But the roof vents, she said quickly. They can drop in, like spiders. Mark ran to the armory room and opened a panel. Inside were old rifles, knives, and one energy turret. It still has power, he said, aiming it at the entrance. Kalina handed him Kior. Keep them safe. He looked confused. Where are you going? She looked at the roof. To make sure they don't come in from above. Kalina, I was a mother before I was a widow, she said, and I will not let them touch my children. She climbed the emergency ladder to the roof vents, heart pounding, claws ready. Below, the storm came. The raiders reached the shelter, snarling and screaming. And for the first time since the war began, the alien widow chose to stand and fight, not to survive, but to protect the only family she had left. She bleeds for him, and he bleeds for them. The storm of violence broke above the ruined shelter. Kalina reached the top of the ladder and crawled through the narrow shaft to the roof. Vent. Wind howled through the cracked metal. The sky above was an ocean of swirling ash and cloud. From her vantage point, she saw them, dozens of figures crawling across broken beams and rooftops like predators. Their faces were hidden behind scavenged helmets and twisted masks. Some had weapons, others held jagged blades or makeshift claws. She didn't hesitate. With one hand, Kalina pulled loose a panel from the side of the vent and sharpened the edge against the metal wall. She crouched in the opening, ready to fight like a mother beast. Below her, the children cried, and deep inside, the shelter. Mark moved quickly, setting up defenses around the main entrance. The turret was online now, its faint hum vibrating through the floor. Kior was tucked under a table, Ilani lying beside him, unconscious but breathing easier. Mark checked his rifle's charge. Not much left. He muttered to himself. Just hold. Just hold. Suddenly, crash! One of the raiders dropped through a hole in the ceiling, faster than expected. Kalina spun, slashing with the metal shard. It struck the creature's shoulder, tearing flesh. The raider screamed and swung a rusted blade, catching her across the ribs. Pain lit through her side. She fell backward, rolled, then kicked him hard in the chest. He staggered and fell through the shaft, crashing into the hallway below. Kalina groaned. Her side was bleeding. Bad. But she crawled forward again, her hand pressing into the wound, her breathing ragged. She had no time to rest. Another shadow moved across the roof. This time 2 raiders approached the vent. One jumped. Kalina stabbed him midair. The other backed off, then threw something. A small sphere rolled toward her. She knew that shape. An old plasma mine. It beeped. Kalina's eyes widened. She grabbed the body of the raider she'd killed and threw it onto the mine. Boom! The vent exploded. Flames roared. Metal flew. Kalina was thrown backwards, smashing into a wall. Her vision blurred. Ears ringing. Blood down her leg now, but she was alive. Below, the explosion shook the whole shelter. Mark staggered. Dust rained from above. Kalina! He shouted. No, answer. Then pounding at the main door. The raiders were at the front now, dozens of them. Mark activated the turret. It fired, clean, fast bursts of energy. 3 raiders fell immediately. The others pulled back. But they were clever. They spread out. Found the side doors, the old vents. Weak spots. Mark knew he couldn't stop them all. He ran back to the medical chamber. Kior looked up at him, eyes full of fear. Is she dead? Mark shook his head. No, she's stronger than anything out there. He grabbed a second rifle from a broken locker. It sparked, half dead, but it would fire once or twice. Then he heard it. The roof gave way. Kalina crashed down through the ceiling, covered in ash, blood, and smoke. Her leg was burned, her arm torn, but she was still moving. She landed hard, rolled, and grabbed a metal rod. Mark rushed to her side. "You're hurt." "Shut up and help me kill them," she growled. He grinned despite everything. "Welcome back." They stood together side by side as the first wave of raiders burst through the side entrance. Kaylina charged. Her claws glowed faintly as she slashed through the first attacker. Mark covered her, firing over her shoulder, picking off those behind her. One raider lunged with a blade. Mark took the hit to his arm, then slammed his rifle into the raider's head. Kaylina saw the blood dripping from him. "You're bleeding." "So are you," he shot back. "I don't care if I die," she said, panting. "But my children will live." Mark nodded. "Then we die standing." Together, they fought. Minutes. Past bodies fell then. Silence. The last of the raiders lay dead or unconscious. The shelter was quiet except for the crackling fire of the ruined turret and the shallow breathing of two broken warriors. Mark dropped to his knees, pressing a hand to his bleeding arm. Kaylina collapsed beside him, gripping her ribs. Kior ran to her, crying, "Mother!" She pulled him close. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you." Mark looked at her, his face pale. "We can't stay here. They'll send more. And next time, we might not make it." Kaylina nodded, holding Kior close. "I know." Then she remembered the data core, the proof that someone had started the war on purpose, that everything had been manipulated. They still had it. Kaylina turned to Mark. "You said there's a signal post, a tower, near the mountain ridge." He nodded weakly. "If we get there, we can send the truth." She stood slowly, using the wall for support. "Then we move at dawn," she said. Mark smiled. "You're insane." "You bled for my children," she said. "Now I bleed for your cause." Outside, the sky thundered again. More enemies were surely coming. But inside the ruined shelter, two warriors, one alien, one human, prepared to take their final stand, not just for survival, but for the truth. They called it a broken family, until he stood with them. The world was quiet before dawn, too quiet. Kaylina stood at the broken doorway of the shelter, her side bandaged, her claws still stained with dried blood. She looked up at the pale gray sky where the stars had vanished behind layers of smoke and dust. She could barely breathe. Every step hurt. But inside her chest, a fire still burned. Behind her, Mark finished tying a sling around his arm. His face was pale, but his eyes were focused, steady. Kior sat quietly beside his sister, watching the two adults prepare. Ilani stirred softly. Her fever had broken in the night. She was weak, but alive. They had survived another night, but now they had to finish what they started. Mark pulled the data core from his bag and held it out to Kaylina. "Still working. It has everything. The message, the proof, coordinates of all those fake transmissions." Kaylina held it carefully, like it was the heart of a living being. "If we reach the signal tower," she said, "we can send it across sectors, maybe even to the Central Council." Mark nodded. "Someone will hear it, and someone will listen." Kaylina looked down at her children. "Then we moved together, as a family." They left the shelter before the sun broke the horizon, walking across the ruined landscape, cloaked in ash and silence. The world around them was dead, burned trees, broken buildings, empty roads. But up ahead, rising above the jagged hills, stood a tall, black structure. The tower. Old, cracked, but still standing. As they approached, Kaylina slowed. Her claws tingled. Something was wrong, Mark noticed too. "Trap? Likely," she whispered. He scanned the area with a broken military tracker. 4 heat signatures, not raiders, not drones. "Soldiers," she said, "waiting for us." Kaylina looked at the children. "We can't turn back." Mark smiled, though there was no joy in it. "I'll go first. You follow if it's clear." She touched his arm. "No, We do this together. They moved forward slowly. The tower was surrounded by fallen debris. The doors had been torn open long ago. Inside, it was dark. Dust floated through the air like ghosts. Kaylina held the data core in her hand. Her claws tightened. They stepped into the main chamber, and that's when the light snapped on. 4 soldiers surrounded them. Black armor, red visors, guns raised. "Drop your weapons," one said coldly, "and give us the core." Kaylina stepped in front of her children. Mark raised both hands. "Don't do this." The lead soldier walked forward. His voice was mechanical. "That data ends this war. It undoes everything we built. It can't be allowed." Kaylina's eyes narrowed. "You're not soldiers. You're the ones who started it." The soldier removed his helmet. A human face, calm, sharp eyes, no remorse. "I'm what your leaders feared," he said. "A future where peace threatens profit." Kaylina growled. "You killed my mate." He didn't blink. "And we'll kill you too." Then he raised his weapon, but Mark was faster. He pulled a small grenade from his belt and threw it to the floor. Flashbang. Light exploded. Kaylina leapt forward with a scream. Her claws sliced through the first soldier's armor. He collapsed, gasping. Mark tackled the second, slamming him into the wall. The third fired. Kaylina took the shot in her shoulder but didn't stop. She drove her claw into his neck. Blood sprayed. The fourth tried to run, but Mark pulled the trigger and dropped him where he stood. Silence. The tower was theirs. Kaylina staggered to the console. Her hand shook as she plugged in the data core. The console flickered. Then a soft voice spoke. "Welcome, Alliance Terminal. Would you like to broadcast?" "Yes," Kaylina whispered, "to all sectors." She uploaded the file. Images flashed on the screen. Proof of the lies, the forged transmissions, the lab messages, the faces of the ones who had betrayed both species. Then she pressed send. The console glowed. The signal launched into the sky, across systems, across planets, across galaxies. The truth was free. Kaylina collapsed to her knees. Mark rushed to her side, holding her gently. "You did it," he whispered. She smiled weakly. "We did it." Outside, the wind changed. Above them, for the first time in weeks, sunlight broke through the smoke. Warm, soft, real. Later that day, ships came. Not enemies, but survivors. Resistance fighters, medics, humans and aliens alike, drawn by the signal. They found the tower, found the children, found the 2 warriors who had stood together when no one else would. One of the commanders, a female alien officer, stepped forward. She looked at Kaylina, then at Mark. "Who are you?" she asked. Mark stood tall, his arm still bleeding. "We're just a broken family." Kaylina stood beside him. "But we're still standing." The officer looked around the battlefield. Then she saluted. "So you are." Epilogue months passed. The message spread far. Governments collapsed. War criminals were hunted. New peace talks began. And in a small new settlement at the edge of the stars, a woman and her 2 children lived with a human who never gave up. They were not the same species. But they shared a bond no one could break, not born from blood, but forged in fire.